The views and opinions expressed by the guest speaker on this episode are solely those of the guest. The content shared is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice or endorsement.
The following is a reading of a presentation given by Dr. James Lake titled The Future of Mental Health Care.
To be most effective, mental health care must address root psychological, social, cultural, biological, and spiritual causes of human suffering. The contemporary Western model is limited because its theoretical foundations and clinical methods address only a few of the complex causes and meanings of mental illness. In this short talk, I'm going to take a broad view of the evolution of mental health care, comment on important emerging conventional and alternative therapies, and extrapolate where we will be as a paradigm and a profession in the coming decades. The number of mentally ill will track growth in the world population, resulting in an increasingly urgent need for safer, more effective, and more affordable treatment choices. Integrative mental health care will address these challenges, incorporating both modern research findings and ancient healing traditions to more adequately and more compassionately address the root causes of mental illness. The future of mental health care will be both daunting in its challenges and filled with promise. In the coming decades, the way we will think about and treat mental illness will be shaped by fundamental advances in neuroscience and genetics and the scientific validation of ancient healing traditions, by demographic trends and economic necessity, as well as changing social norms and spiritual values of Western culture. I'll begin with a brief overview of social, demographic, and economic trends that are driving medicine and mental health care towards an increasingly pluralistic or integrative paradigm in the United States and other Western countries. I'll then comment on emerging paradigms in science and their implications for the future of mental health care. Approximately 12% of the world's population experiences a major mental illness in any given year. Yet the overwhelming majority of mentally ill who live outside of developed Western countries do not have access to or cannot afford conventional pharmacological treatments. Among the mentally ill in countries where conventional drug therapies are available and affordable, there has been a trend towards increasing use of non-pharmacological therapies, often in the absence of compelling evidence of efficacy or safety. These circumstances define an urgent agenda for transforming mental health care from the limited ideas and tools of contemporary biomedical psychiatry into a more eclectic paradigm that incorporates evidence-based non-conventional therapies. Conventional biomedicine is based on an enormous body of research and is often very effective. However, conventional biomedical theory and clinical practices have clearly failed to adequately address medical and psychiatric illnesses. In the United States, 15% of the gross domestic product, about $1.6 trillion annually, is spent on healthcare. However, multiple factors interfere with the capacity of conventional biomedicine to provide adequate care. These include unresolved issues of efficacy and safety for many conventional therapies, restrictions on treatments covered by insurance, increasing costs of care, and growing dissatisfaction with the often impersonal quality of conventional medical care. The limitations of the orthodox biomedical model invite rigorous, open-minded consideration of novel explanatory models of mental illness, as well as the evidence for non-conventional treatment modalities. Recent years have witnessed rapidly increasing openness among conventionally trained clinicians and researchers to non-conventional therapies. At the same time, there has been growing demand for more personal and more meaningful contact with clinicians, which is often difficult to achieve in conventional health care settings. Let's move from these general considerations to specific concerns affecting mental health care in Western countries. Conventional pharmacological treatments of mental illness have a mixed record of success. Systematic reviews of high-quality studies consistently report limited efficacy of pharmacologic and psychotherapeutic treatments of major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, and dementia. These issues, together with concerns about safety and high costs of conventional treatment, underscore the need to systematically and rigorously evaluate promising non-pharmacological treatment choices. Although biomedical approaches are clearly limited, the good news is that the paradigm of Western biomedicine is robust, constantly evolving and open to change. The future of mental health care, including how we think about mental illness and how we work as clinicians, will be strongly influenced by research advances in both conventional biomedicine and the range of non-conventional healing approaches. There is still no consensus on a single best or most complete explanatory model or paradigm of consciousness or mind-body interactions. Western psychiatry describes brain function in terms of neurotransmitters, neural circuits, and electromagnetic energy fields. However, determining whether biological or electromagnetic factors are causes or effects of psychopathology is often problematic and remains the focus of basic neuroscience research. Western biomedical psychiatry itself can be understood as a paradigm or set of shared beliefs and clinical practices. While conventional psychiatry is shaped by ongoing advances in its theories, its clinical practices and research priorities are strongly influenced by a profit-driven pharmaceutical industry. These circumstances limit and define the rate and direction of change in the conceptual foundations and clinical therapeutics of mental health care. Other important factors shaping the future of mental health care include treatment needs that are not adequately addressed by conventional therapies, changing views on the classification and diagnosis of psychiatric disorders being formalized in the DSM-5, increasing openness of physicians and patients to non-conventional therapies, and a broad social trend towards increasing holism in lifestyle and health care choices. Ongoing advances in biomedical psychiatry are playing an important role in the emerging integrative paradigm. These advances are resulting in more specific, more effective, and safer conventional treatments, including drugs based on novel mechanisms of action and new therapeutic uses of light, weak electrical current, and magnetic fields. Collectively, these advances are transforming the theoretical foundations and clinical therapeutics of contemporary Western mental health care. Continued progress in functional brain imaging is improving our understanding of the role of specific neurotransmitters and neural circuits in normal brain functioning and mental illness. Advances in understanding of the genetic and neurochemical basis of mental illness are leading to the next era in psychopharmacology. The AmpliChip is the first FDA-approved test of genes in the cytochrome P450 system that influence psychotropic drug metabolism and determine how rapidly specific drugs are metabolized. Although currently used only in research, the AmpliChip will soon be used clinically to identify the most efficacious treatments with fewest adverse effects. In parallel with advances in Western biomedicine, in the coming decades, our knowledge of mechanisms underlying non-conventional therapies will rapidly advance from simplistic notions of taking herbs and vitamins to a more sophisticated research-driven model that is leading to individualized treatment plans incorporating biological, mind-body, and so-called energy therapies targeting complex, multi-layered causes of mental illness. Improvements in quality assurance and manufacturing of vitamins, herbals, amino acids, and other natural products are yielding high-quality, standardized preparations that meet the highest efficacy and safety standards. Treatment protocols incorporating validated mind, body, and energy therapies are becoming widely used preventive therapies for maintaining optimal mental functioning in healthy populations, as well as for the treatment of depression, anxiety, psychosis, and other mental health problems. A critical review of the research evidence suggests that therapies currently outside of the orthodox biomedical model are being widely embraced in the United States and other Western countries, are being validated by Western-style research studies, are safe, often inexpensive, and in some cases, cost-competitive compared to established conventional treatments. Many widely used non-conventional therapies are derived from highly evolved systems of medicine, consistently result in beneficial outcomes when appropriately used, and are finding new treatment applications for both medical and mental health problems. Treatments used in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, for example, have been validated in their parent cultures over millennia of beneficial outcomes when applied by a skilled clinician, but are only now being investigated in Western-style research studies. Acupuncture and other modalities from Asian healing traditions have already made strong inroads in Western culture and are rapidly finding new applications for a broad range of medical and mental health problems. Virtual reality exposure therapy is rapidly emerging as the treatment of choice for PTSD and specific phobias. Ancient healing traditions and accumulating modern research evidence suggest that prayer and other forms of directed intention may help alleviate symptoms of physical and mental illness. This is the domain of energy medicine. Let's talk a bit about conceptual frameworks or paradigms emerging from science and different systems of medicine that will shape the future of mental health care. Biomedicine is beginning to incorporate concepts from emerging theories in physics, biology, and information science describing structure-function relationships in complex living systems, including the human brain. Biomedicine rests on the premise that discrete causal relationships exist between identifiable disease factors and disease states that can be adequately characterized using current empirical methods. In contrast to the orthodox view of empiricism and linear causality, many traditional healing systems conceptualize illness, health, and healing in terms of subtle non-linear processes at multiple hierarchic levels of body, mind, spirit within each unique human and between humans and their environments. Complex systems theory invites an increasingly integrative perspective in medicine and mental health care. I strongly believe that basic advances will take place in the conceptual foundations of biomedical psychiatry when the research dialogue includes complex systems theory. Complex systems theory argues that dynamic non-linear energetic or informational states at multiple levels in the brain and body manifest as symptoms. This view implies that although a particular symptom may have one apparent, primary, or discrete cause, complex dynamic causes can vary significantly between individuals reporting similar symptoms as a consequence of each person's unique biochemical, genetic, social, psychological, and energetic makeup. For example, light exposure therapy is known to have therapeutic effects on melatonin and neurotransmitter activity that result in improved mood, but emerging research evidence suggests that light interacts with brain dynamics on subtle energetic levels consistent with the predictions of quantum mechanics. A new direction in our understanding of consciousness will come from an evolving paradigm that views brain functioning from the perspective of quantum field theory. Quantum brain dynamics attempts to explain subtle characteristics of brain functioning in terms of non-classical forms of energy and information. Quantum brain dynamics may eventually help explain non-local interactions between the consciousness of the medical practitioner and the physical body or consciousness of the patient. Quantum brain dynamics theory may eventually yield a testable hypothesis about the role of intention in health and healing, clarifying mechanisms underlying meditation, mind-body practices, and energy medicine. In contrast to conventional biomedicine, other systems of medicine postulate the involvement of different forms of energy and information in health, illness, and healing. In conventional biomedicine, mainstream concepts from chemistry and biology provide the theoretical foundations for explanatory models of illness phenomena. However, a more complete and accurate understanding of the role of consciousness in health and healing may require a convergence of biomedicine and non-biomedical paradigms. Some treatments not currently endorsed by biomedical psychiatry are based on well-described forms of energy, such as electromagnetism and sound. Examples include EEG, biofeedback, music and patterned binaural sounds, full-spectrum bright light exposure, microcurrent brain stimulation, and high-density negative ions. Treatment approaches based on such classically described forms of energy and information have specific or general beneficial effects at the level of neurotransmitter systems or brain circuits. In contrast, treatments based on postulated non-classical kinds of energy or information, including quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, may have both direct and subtle effects on brain function and mental health. Non-conventional modalities based on concepts that are presently outside of the tenets of biomedicine include acupuncture, homeopathic remedies, healing touch, qigong, and Reiki. The diverse factors that contribute to mental illness often make it difficult to accurately and reliably assess the causes of symptoms and to identify the most efficacious treatments. In the future, a more integrative mental health care will include sophisticated assessment approaches capable of evaluating the causes of mental illness at biological, informational, and energetic levels of body, brain, mind. Increasing clinical use and ongoing research studies of non-conventional assessment approaches will validate some as useful in mental health care, while others will become marginalized. The increasing use of novel assessment approaches will lead to more comprehensive and cost-effective treatment planning. Functional testing of urinary and serum neurotransmitter metabolites and immune factors is adding an important dimension to contemporary psychiatric assessment. Quantitative electroencephalography, which is already an important research tool, is becoming widely employed in clinical psychiatric assessment. Emerging technologies are being used to detect frequencies and coherence properties of ultra-weak biophotons associated with the brain and body, providing useful indicators of mental illness at an energetic and informational level. Pulse diagnosis in Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and Tibetan medicine will become understood in the context of modern physics. Given where we are today and the direction and rate of change in mental health care, where will we be by the end of this decade and at the mid-century mark? By mid-century, a new paradigm will be well in place and will inform the theories and clinical therapeutics of mental health care. In the year 2050, the biomedical paradigm will remain the dominant perspective of science and Western medicine. However, biomedical theory will be informed by complexity theory, accumulating findings from research in the basic sciences and consciousness. There will no longer be a rigid dichotomy between biomedical and complementary and alternative medicine. Ongoing advances in the genetics and neurobiology of mental illness will have yielded more specific, more effective, and more individualized pharmacological, genetic, and energetic therapies for major mental illnesses. Rigorously designed studies will have established the mechanisms of action of some non-conventional biological, mind-body, and so-called energy modalities and validated their therapeutic efficacy. By the same token, many conventional and complementary and alternative medicine in current use will have been refuted. Advances in functional brain imaging will permit studies on postulated roles of magnetic fields, biophotons, and macroscopic highly coherent quantum field effects on normal brain functioning and mental illness. We are in the midst of a global economic crisis, and there are still no clear solutions to enormous problems we are facing in the United States and the world. However, there has seldom been a time in recent history when more collective efforts and critical thought has examined the ideas and practices of health care to find ways to make the system work better. To work as a mental health professional in today's healthcare environment, one has to be an optimist. Healthcare reform in the United States is now inevitable. Changes in the financial infrastructure and therapeutic options of mental health care that will take place in the coming decades will lead to a highly integrated system of care, improved access to services, and most important, more personalized and more affordable treatment choices. Mental health care, as it exists today, is in urgent need of new ideas, better and safer approaches to the prevention of and alleviation of human suffering, and more compassionate standards of care. Our ability to shape the future of mental health is limited only by our collective imaginations, our determination, and our willingness to work. Thank you for listening to this talk.